Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to ODI. My name is Bruce Byiers. I'm not from ODI. I'm from the ECDPM, which is the European Centre for Development Policy Management, which, as well as a far longer acronym than ODI, is something of a sort of a younger, smaller cousin based in Maastricht and Brussels, looking at development policy between the EU and Africa. But ECDPM and ODI have collaborated in numerous projects in the past. We're all part of the European Think Tanks group. And the work that's going to be discussed today is another sort of example of where ECDPM and ODI have been working together. So I'm very pleased to be here with colleagues Anna Rosengren of ECDPM, Laura Rodriguez from ODI, and we have the pleasure of having Professor Rolf van der Hoven from Erasmus University and Geneva. So the focus for today is on employment, as you well know. I think for me, actually, this is kind of interesting because I saw the launch of the World Development Report on jobs was precisely in this room. So that was already 2 years ago, and there was a lot of discussion about how jobs needed to be put center of the policy debate. Following on from the Arab Spring, there was more and more recognition of the role that jobs had, not only in sort of providing employment in raising incomes, reducing poverty, but also in terms of social cohesion. So I think the fact that jobs is at the core of the development process, I think, is pretty clear. But at the same time, it is still not very explicitly at the center of policy. So this is a little bit the focus of the discussions today, is to see how or what would it mean to put jobs at the center of policy. And we're going to be looking at different case study countries that then allow us to sort of address some of these questions. So not only is it at the center of the sort of the policy or the development process, it's also what people want and need. A paper actually produced by ODI just last year talked about the My World survey. This is the survey done by the UN with close to 4 million respondents who basically provide their, out of 16 possible priorities for a better world, what their priorities would be. And the fourth is jobs, coming closely after education, health, and better governance. So I think the challenge, though, that's going to come out of today is that to look at employment, even though it is central, it's quite a complex area to look at. You can look at it in terms of different levels, in terms of households and livelihoods. You can look at it in terms of firms, in terms of firm growth and expansion and creation of new firms, in terms of sectors and industries, in terms of towns, in terms of population groups. So in fact, one of the challenges of bringing employment to the center of policy is precisely the fact that it is at the center. So there's a kind of paradox of that comes about of its central position, makes it very difficult to look at. And obviously, there's a range of different drivers that we can talk about. So there's kind of direct drivers in terms of credit, in terms of actual specific training, etc., for job creation. But also, of course, is the influence of lots of indirect drivers. And the challenge, again, is to try and distinguish between which are the direct and which are the indirect, and how can policy actually affect these. So today, the idea is to try and look at these different case study countries that we're going to discuss, and try and see to what degree we can cut through some of these different complexities, and also try and draw out some of the sort of the key questions that need to be addressed in order to kind of take this agenda forward. So to do that, we're going to be discussing two projects. One which is the broader Development Progress Project, which is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation-funded project, which is taking place here at ODI. And this is looking at development progress across 8 different dimensions, employment being one. And where the focus is really to try and look at not so much why countries aren't doing well, why they're failing to develop, but more to focus on the positive agenda. Okay, given the challenges that countries face, what are some of the progress measures that we can spot, and what are the policies and drivers behind those? So it's kind of turning the argument around into explaining the progress that there is, rather than pointing to the lack of progress which exists across all countries. I mean, if we're going to look at employment progress in the UK, of course, there are areas for improvement, there are gaps, etc. as well. So this is the kind of the thinking behind development progress more broadly. So the idea is to kind of measure, understand, and communicate across these different levels of progress, across 8 different dimensions. Today we're talking employment. And the second session is a separate project, which is being run in parallel here at ODI, which is Jobs for the Future, which is therefore looking, whereas our development progress is looking back across the last 20 years, trying to understand where progress has come from, The Jobs for the Future project is more casting forwards to try and decide, okay, given what we know about the different changes that are taking place in the world economy, what does this imply for future types of jobs? And especially, what does it mean for skills and training and the kinds of requirements that will be needed there? So again, trying to bring this back to policy discussions. And so the third session really will have a brief overview paper which kind of tries to tie some of these things together, but really opens things up again to try and have a discussion with you. To see what this means, what are the implications, therefore, for putting employment at the centre of the discussion on, especially on economic transformation and on development more generally. So, with this brief introduction, we have a short video now, I believe, 3 minutes, just to kick us off, looking at the employment progress before we have the presentations and some discussions. Let it roll.
Decent jobs are important for reducing poverty and inequality. They also impact on citizen empowerment and personal well-being. But populations are growing. Globally, 600 million new jobs will have to be created over the next 15 years just to keep employment rates constant. We need to understand how to generate more and better jobs and ensure that disadvantaged groups are not left out. One way is to learn from what works from countries that have made impressive progress today. In Sri Lanka, despite difficult conditions, including a long-standing conflict, unemployment fell from 15% in 1992 to just 4% in 2012. Wages increased by a fifth between 2006 and 2012, while employment opportunities for women rose. Progress has been made possible by promoting investment, prioritizing education to upskill workers, and orientating the market towards exports such as garments. Migration has also helped to relieve pressures in the local labor market, although there are at times concerns for workers' welfare overseas. To sustain the progress made, Sri Lanka needs to retain its competitiveness, raise productivity, and attract further investment. Increasing access to employment opportunities, particularly for youth and women, should also be a focus for the future. In Uganda, there are also signs of employment progress over the last 2 decades. Strong management of the economy since the 1990s has ensured relatively rapid and inclusive growth. This has been accompanied by developments in banking, telecommunications, and transport. Wage employment in Uganda increased from 14% of total employment in 2003 to 24% in 2009. The quality of jobs has also dramatically improved as more and more households move away from agriculture and get their income from other sources. Productivity doubled between 1990 and 2010, as did the total labor force, rising from 7.5 million in 1990 to 14.5 million by 2012. Challenges do remain. Employment in Uganda remains largely agrarian, accounting for 3/4 of the workforce but only 1/4 of GDP. Progress also needs to be achieved at a larger scale due to high population growth. On average, Ugandan women have over 6 children, and opportunities need to be extended to the young in particular. Both countries have shown how it is possible to increase employment opportunities, even from a low base. Emerging technologies and markets are providing new opportunities. The challenge now will be to broaden access to decent work, extend opportunities to excluded groups, and sustain the progress made. Find out more lessons at developmentprogress.org.